The Twilight Saga has taught me one thing, it is simply this. If you want to pick up on a girl, you have to tell her, I'm dangerous. You must stay away from me. I have a dark secret that you must not know about. What is it? I can't tell you yet. You're gonna have to figure that out for yourself. You better stay away from me. Well, why do you keep stalking me? Because that's the way I roll. Because I'm so attracted to you, but yet I cannot have you. It's driving me crazy. Hey guys, this is MPig, and today I want to talk about Twilight Saga New Moon, which I just got out of the red box just a few moments ago, and I finished. And I watched it with my mummy because she likes Twilight for some odd reason. It's the strangest phenomenon. 40-year-old women love this series, and I just don't understand it. Maybe it's because I'm a man. And, you know, and I'm not saying this to be, like, insulting to women, like saying, oh, we're smarter than you or whatever. That's the reason why we don't like this crap. No, because I understand, because there's some movies, as a guy, that I really like, that almost every woman that I've ever talked to is pretty much like, you like that? That was a terrible movie. And I was like, no, it wasn't. It was cool because things blew up and it was like, and then that guy's head blew off and it was like, ah, and there's gore everywhere and they just look at me as if I'm crazy. I think Twilight is kind of like that with women. I think there's something that genuinely draws them to it, because at the end of this movie, I looked over and my mummy, who is 40 years old, is older than 40, she's nearly 50 now, was freaking crying over Twilight, New Moon, and I didn't understand what was emotional. I did not understand what was emotional. I was looking over at her going, well, Mummy, why are you crying? And she was like, it's so sad. And I was like, what's sad? And apparently she was affected by the fact that, I'm not going to give away any spoilers. You know what? No spoilers. This is a spoiler-free zone from here on out, because you don't have to be spoilerific in order to talk about how genuinely hilarious these movies are. It's true. They are funny. I think these go right up there with Stephen King's The Mist, or at least the film. The book is actually pretty good, but the film is god-awful. But it goes in that same category as far as just funny, ha-ha, hilarious kind of movies that are unintentionally funny. But they're so unintentionally funny that you almost sit back and you go, you know, when they were editing this together, they had realized that this is terrible, right? I mean, there's so many slow-mo sequences, like, set in the background of, like, really bad hipster music. I mean, there's so many, like, vampires running really slow, and their hair is flowing all over the place, and their pecs are practically bursting out of their shirts, and they're so sexy that they're practically just eking with, sexuality and sensuality. And it's just ridiculous. There are so many shots of Edward Cullen. And again, I'm not going to come at this from the perspective of I'm a guy and all you women are stupid, because that's a horrible way to look at things. But there are so many shots of, like, Edward Cullen walking in slow motion with, like, his shirt, like, flapping in the wind or whatever. And I understand now. I understand how women feel about, let's say, girls, because honestly this is aimed at girls. There's some older women who like it, but for the majority of the fan base of this, it's mostly like girls between the ages of like 14 and 19. I can understand now when you like sit down to watch like a action movie aimed at guys, and you've got like Angelina Jolie, who's just like in a sextastic position in every single shot. Because watching this film, I understand that, because every single chance they get, either the werewolf guy takes his shirt off, or Edward is walking in slow motion in this sort of sensual kind of fashion. It's ridiculous. It's silly, and it just makes me laugh and giggle, and that's part of the reason why I like this kind of stuff so much. It is funny. I even turned to my mom and I was like, you know what? I can't wait for the next one. I can't wait to watch it, because the first film was of this same caliber. In fact, the first film was a lot funnier. In this one, there's quite a few sequences where it just drags on and on and on, and it almost gets so ridiculous and so silly that it loses itself. Once you get into the whole werewolf deal, these are some of the worst looking werewolves. I swear to God, these werewolves are a disgrace to the werewolf race. They should just completely be removed from all modern memory. The CGI work is bad. Even like when there's a point where they're driving in a car, and it's so obvious that they were doing this in like the backlot of Universal Studios. It looked terrible. And I was sitting there going, it's not that hard. They're driving a car. And this is so obviously a green screen, almost like it looked like one of those 1940s movies where, you know, where they're driving the car and they're moving the wheel too much and stuff. And they're like, hey, and there's like this really bad background, and you're sitting there going, they're obviously not driving. This looks so bad. And there's shots like that in this movie, and that's inexcusable. You can't get all cheapoid on this kind of stuff. And I'm sad because Chris Weitz is a really damn good director. He directed About a Boy, which is one of my favorite movies. Chris Weitz, you can do so much better than this in The Golden Compass. Why do you degrade yourself to such low-level fantasy? And his Dark Materials books were really great books, but the screenplays were bad, which were also written by Chris Weitz. So honestly, maybe he's less talented than I'm giving him credit. But he directed About a Boy, which is a movie which had a lot of impact on me growing up. I loved that movie. And then he goes on to do this, and I feel so disappointed in him. I'm just looking at him going, dude, Twilight is schlock. This is not going to help your career. Maybe he loves the books. Maybe it's his passion. Just like if somebody told me, hey, you know, you're going to direct an Evangelion movie, I'd totally take it up. I'd be like, hell yeah, I'm going to direct an Evangelion movie. Maybe, you know, this is like his passion project or whatever. Probably not. I'm assuming too much. But the poor guy. The poor guy, because this movie is terribly directed. There are points where I'm sitting here going, all right, this is where they could get a little bit of tension in. There could be that sense of, oh my god, what's going to happen next? But they ruin it with music choice. They ruin it with the editing. And worst of all, they ruin it with the acting. All of the people in this movie, with the exception of the dad. Bella's dad is actually a pretty decent guy. I like him as a character. Every time he shows up, it's like a bright spot in the movie for me. Which is so strange because he's so minor. He's so minor compared to the rest of these people. But when he shows up, I'm just like, oh, Bella's dad, thank you. Thank you so much for making this a little bit better than it was before. Just a tiny little bit. And then, but you know what? Without the terrible editing, without the terrible acting, without the terrible music choices, it wouldn't be so gosh darn hilarious. And that's what we men. And I'm sorry for anybody who watches this movie seriously, because I like terrible movies too. I do. I like some terrible movies. For example, some people would argue that Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, terrible movie. I'm not going to argue with it anymore. I've come to grips with the fact that, you know, the screenplay was bad and the acting was bad and overall the movie was pretty bad, but I still enjoy it. I can actually sit down and watch it and for some reason go along with the ride. And I assume that there are some people who are probably into Twilight that same way. They probably can just get into it. And you know what? Maybe they're genuinely moved by the story, and I'm judging them. And I shouldn't judge other people's opinions on this kind of stuff. But this is frickin' terrible. And it's frickin' terrible so great. It is so greatly terrible that it is endlessly amusing. Go read it. It's fun. This is MPig, and I am signing out. Or am I signing out? You don't want me to sign out. You have no idea how hard it is not to blog. Say it. Say that you'll never watch my blogs again. That was a terrible Edward Cullen impersonation, so I'll just